I promise we're not going to get involved in the war in Europe. Wait, Germany tried to convince Mexico to attack us? Never mind. We're going to war with Germany.
Welcome to Learning with Sprayberry, where we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. Today's topic is the American Homefront during World War I. We're first going to hit up on propaganda. As you saw at the opening, President Woodrow Wilson ran his whole re-election campaign on the idea that the United States is going to stay out of the war. In 1917, that quickly changed. Unfortunately, now he's got to convince the U.S. public to follow his change of heart. He gets this done with propaganda. The U.S. government even created an agency to help with this, called the Committee on Public Information. The whole point of the CPI was to control the information about the war that reaches the public. If the government only shows Germany as the enemy, then discussion about the war effort is going to trend towards consensus that we should be fighting Germany. They accomplished this change of heart in several ways. One way is that the CPI hired speechwriters to create short shows, and these shows toured the nation under the name the 4-Minute Men. These people toured and gave speeches in an effort to convince the American public of the need for the war. They gave 750,000 speeches in over 5,000 U.S. cities. The name 4-Minute Men wasn't a throwaway title either. It was specifically chosen to bring up the freedom idea connected with the Minutemen from the Revolutionary War. In addition to speeches, the CPI also worked with Hollywood to create short films depicting Germans as violent brutes. As more and more people got on board with the idea that we needed to fight a war against Germany, the U.S. needs troops. In 1914, the United States had only around 100,000 troops and only 115,000 National Guard members. To quickly raise troops, Congress passed the Selective Service Act of 1917. This draft initially requires all males from 21 to 30 years old to register, but it was quickly changed to 18 to 45 years old in 1918. By the time World War I wrapped up, 2 million men had volunteered and 2.8 million had been drafted. The last time we'd had a really strong draft was the Civil War, and this one was different because we didn't allow for substitution in this one. So, you've got the people ready to fight, and you've got an army. What next? Well, supplies. Let's get real. The first thing you need to fund any war is financing. The U.S. is about to undertake a major military effort. They require cash from everything from payroll to ammo. To help create the funding, the U.S. started selling war bonds. Essentially, that means you give the federal government money now, and in a few years from now, they're going to return that money with a little bit of interest. Once you get money, once you got troops, what do you need? Food. We're talking about a huge army, and armies love to eat. I mean, who doesn't? To create the food surplus needed, the United States government put many farms to work, growing crops for our troops. The problem is when you move food from civilians to troops, civilians need food. The government combated this problem by convincing civilians to plant their own food. These small gardens were planted for family use and were even given a very patriotic name. Victory Gardens. While we're discussing supplies, let's talk about some big things. Many ships were destroyed due to Germany's use of submarine warfare, so the United States had to crank up shipbuilding to resupply the Army and the Navy with ships. Unions even got on board. Many unions pushed instead for negotiation as opposed to striking, because let's get real, in a climate where everyone is so patriotic, you look real bad threatening to strike over hours worked when soldiers are dying overseas. In addition, the United States created the National War Labor Board. Its purpose was to manage and utilize war resources. It helped make sure that the right resources are getting to the right locations for the right uses. Since we started talking about workers, let's keep it going. So we're taking close to 5 million males out of the workforce at the same time we're trying to crank up production. That don't work. Despite what many businesses and Betsy DeVos says, you can't actually make more with less. It's basic math. So how do you crank up your workforce when you keep sending them overseas? Simple. You look at the one gender you've ignored for centuries. Women. When men began disappearing for the war effort, women were brought in to pick up the slack. And you know what? They did. Like, just as well as the men did. Hashtag feminism. Women worked in factories as police officers, as firemen, as train conductors. Basically, if a guy could do it, so could they. This change in the role of women directly led to a few things popping up for ladies, like suffrage, and a push for women's rights, and probably indirectly the flappers of the Roaring '20s. Alright, so far I've made it seem like everyone ever was straight up on board with the war process. However, that's not true. But the government had a response for that as well. 1917 and 18 were not especially great years for civil liberties. The Espionage Act was passed in 1917 and explicitly stated that anyone who interfered with the military or with recruitment could be arrested and charged with a crime. So if you protested the draft, boom, arrested. Today, that wouldn't fly because it interferes with the freedom of speech. In 1918, we get the Sedition Act. This is basically a throwback to John Adams' sedition. Speech or press that showed the government in a negative light, or anyone who interfered with the sale of war bonds, was a crime that had a punishment of anywhere between 5 to 20 years in prison. It also allowed the United States Postal Service to refuse to send mail that met those standards as well. And this law was in place until 1920. So let's bounce over to question of the day. So we weren't directly attacked in World War I. Our biggest push into this war was a letter that threatened us. However, millions of Americans jumped on board the war effort. Yet, when we were directly attacked on 9/11, we saw only a 3% increase in our troops. Why do you think there was such a difference between volunteerism and recruitment then and now? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let's roll on over to Subscriber of the Week. This week, let's shoot on over to YouTube. I want to thank LOS Everything. I hope I said that right. I literally wrote, I hope I said that right in the thing. Anyway, if you want to be featured as Subscriber of the Week, you've got to subscribe. You can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and or Twitter. Until next time, thanks for watching Learning with Sprayberry, where hopefully we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. Thanks.